Welcome to this hopefully short video on the Lit 325 science fiction film syllabus. You can see from the beginning of the syllabus, this is where all the pertinent information is. Our class meets once per week from 12:15 to 1:30 in Haran 212, and there is a considerable amount of asynchronous work. Moving forward, the course description really kind of outlines the major themes we'll be dealing with all semester long, and so I'm just going to go over it very quickly. The course introduces students to the evolution and aesthetics of the modern science fiction film genre, while analyzing science fiction film's relationship to other film genres, particularly horror films. In our course, students examine the history, appeal, and audience reaction to science fiction films, including their iconography, which is their imagery, their special settings, costumes, and extraterrestrial locales. Extraterrestrial just means beyond Earth, such as space, of science fiction films. Science fiction films allow us to ponder unique characterizations of life, including non-human forms of existence, intelligent technologies and machines, and how these non-human life forms create social anxieties in our all-too-human realm. These social anxieties include fear of technological transformations of the human being, fear of superior forms of intelligence and life to human beings, like extraterrestrials, giant ants, or intelligent machines, fear of diminished resources and environmental degradation, and fear generally of others, leading to mass paranoia due, for example, to the Cold War or virus diseases or misrecognition. We will interrogate the utopian, which is really the perfect elements of life, and dystopian elements of science and scientists as they seek to perfect humans or our social world, but often create new horrors such as math death or worlds of total control. Along the way, we will explore how science legitimates great power inequality through its unspoken racism, through the xenophobia of alien invasion narratives, and contagion discourses. Similarly, we will investigate dehumanizing structures and processes like bureaucracies and virtual worlds that create societies of mass surveillance, explore future alternative realities of mass inequality ruled by corporations, ponder the disposability of human beings, a very unpleasant thought, and enter the Matrix, a simulated dream world of total control. Finally, we will discuss genetic engineering as the new eugenics and ponder what is called the dematerialization of the body and the creation of the new flesh of virtual realities. Okay. A lot of themes. These are going to be going over the entire semester, so this is kind of giving you a breakdown of some of the issues we'll be dealing with. We have one course text. It's Kevin Johnston's science fiction film, A Critical Introduction. This is, unfortunately, the best introduction to science fiction film. And it is a very good book, but it is something that we will need and will therefore supplement with a lot of other readings. And so you'll see a bunch of other articles on Blackboard, and these will appear as PDFs within each of the units for each week. Okay, and there's a lot of these are targeted to the specific films we're watching for the week, but others are just dealing with the intellectual issues in a more profound way. Okay, moving forward, the films. Now, coming up with a list of films is a very challenging thing, and so you can see that this list has a number of asterisks next to it. These are films that eventually we will come at a point in the semester, later in the semester, where we'll decide collectively which films from this list you will want to watch. But some of the films that we are indeed watching include Joon-ho Bong's Snowpiercer. Joon-ho Bong is a great South Korean director, perhaps best known for Parasite, and this is his really interesting environmental film about a society that has basically needs to feed off of human beings in order to continue surviving. John Carpenter's The Thing, a classic of science fiction and horror, is in fact a film that when it came out did not do very well at the box office because of the ways in which at that moment in time extraterrestrials had very positive connotations for most viewers because of Steven Spielberg's E.T. It has since become a classic for a lot of its fantastic special effects, old school special effects, and we'll be looking at it in terms of its unique special effects, as well as the very idea of a species that invades and takes over people's bodies without anyone being able to know, except through a blood test that will be determined later on. David Cronenberg's Videodrome. David Cronenberg is one of the great horror body horror directors, And his Videodrome is a really fascinating take on the dominant technology of the time, video and television. And we can really look at Cronenberg's film as anticipating a lot of the things that are going on now with social media and with the internet. But when he made this film, they had not been created. Nevertheless, Cronenberg continues to always kind of provoke the limits of what we kind of think about in terms of what various ways in which the body is being remade. And in this film, the whole idea is the body is very literally being remade by technology, in this instance, video and television. We'll move back in time and look at Gordon Douglas's Them. Them is a Cold War story about giant ants that appear after various atomic experiments in the western part of the United States. And this is an effect of the toxic waste, and they therefore become these giant entities that basically could take over all of the United States. It is an example of a invasion narrative, and that's something we'll talk more about later on in the semester. Richard Fleischer's Soylent Green. This is a classic film from the 1970s, made on a very, very short budget. But in this film, this is a moment when, because of unfettered capitalism, we have destroyed the environment, and there is a real overpopulation problem. And so there isn't enough adequate space, and so what ends up happening is that people have to live in hallways, and there's excess people all over the place, and vast social inequality. And then there's something called Soylent Green, which I won't give away yet because it has a very important part in the film. I'll slip over the Alex Garland because I'm not sure we're going to go on that, and move to Terry Gilliam's Brazil. Terry Gilliam was part of Monty Python, and Brazil is his take on George Orwell's 1984. It's a brilliant kind of analysis of a total society of bureaucracy, and it is simultaneously a dystopia in its envisioning of technology as somehow superior to human beings. And so it is from 1985. It's a really interesting story about technological and bureaucratic totalitarianism that has nothing to do necessarily with a dominant government like 1984 did, but is in fact perhaps closer to our current reality. Next is Andrew Niccol's Gattaca. Andrew Niccol is a consistently provocative director who does low-budget fare. This is a society that is totally dominated by genetics, and basically your genetic profile decides your place in the world. It would be a kind of a fascinating comment on some of the new genetic engineering technologies that are actually very pervasive in our present. And he is imagining what would happen in a society that was organized around like a eugenics society, not too dissimilar from what Hitler was trying to establish with the Final Solution. This one, though, is brought again through technology. We'll see these Christopher Nolan films. You have to have a Christopher Nolan film in a science fiction class. We'll decide between Inception and Interstellar. One is dealing with the nature of reality, and the other is dealing with environmental degradation and space travel, as well as both films are dealing with time in fascinating ways in simultaneous worlds. We'll go back in time again for George Pal production. That's why I have Pal Bone as producer, and then I have the director, because this is really George Pal was famous in the 1950s for doing high-budget science fiction films that were very much the technology and the special effects will look really ridiculous to us now, but at the time were really quite innovative. And so we really have to look at this. This is the War of the Worlds, and this is another example of an invasion narrative. And it's an allegory of the Cold War, and it has all kinds of really messed up politics in it that we'll be considering later on. We'll perhaps be looking at Jordan Peele's Nope, a very provocative, as all of Jordan Peele's work is. This is his so-called science fiction film, and it is in many ways taking on the genre while asking us to think about the genre differently. We'll also be looking at 2 Ridley Scott films. Scott is really just, back in the day, back in this very important time period, was a really brilliant director. He made Alien, which was in fact supposed to be basically a horror film in space. And he did this on a relatively low budget. And Alien had then created a series of franchise, and we're going to look back at this because it is really essential for kind of thinking about the boundaries between horror and science fiction. It's our first film of the semester. When the film was actually made, it was actually really viewed as a horror film in space. In fact, the marketing promotion said, "No one in space can hear you scream." It was really very much kind of tapping into horror film audiences at the time, because that was a dominant genre at the time. We'll also look at his Blade Runner, kind of a really important example of science fiction film noir, which in many ways kind of evokes past genres in order to create a fascinating future. His rendition of the city and what LA would look like is fascinating, as well as we see genetically produced entities, the replicants, that are in many ways as human, in fact, perhaps more human than the human beings in the film. A kind of interesting existential film. We'll also look at Paul Verhoeven's RoboCop. Verhoeven has done a number of interesting science fiction films, from RoboCop to Total Recall to even Starship Troopers, if you will. RoboCop is his really fascinating film in which a cop is basically owned by a corporation. This is a really fascinating film for its kind of appearance in the 1980s, because it was a moment of great privatization, and it shows that anxiety as corporations were starting to take over what used to be governmental functions, including taking over and owning a person that is then programmed to be RoboCop. Finally, for our list is the Wachowski sisters' The Matrix. The Matrix is just arguably the most important film of its time, and it is something that is still very current, even though it's over 24 years old. And that was because of the vision of the Wachowski sisters. We'll look at it both as an analysis of our present, because it really is anticipating this, in the ways in which artificial intelligence, or what we call now machine learning, or just simply algorithms, have in many ways dominated our present in fascinating ways. And we'll look at how what was kind of very science fiction in 1999 is actually really upon us now. Moving forward, you need to watch these films on your own. I will try to provide as many of them as possible. They'll appear in the units, but if I can't get a copy, you will be responsible for renting them. And so that's just a warning right now. All of them are available through various streaming services. I will indicate which streaming service for each time. For example, our first film is unfortunately only available through the Stars streaming service. If you do not have that, you can sign up for a week, for one free week, to be able to view it. Or if you know how to find films on the dark web, feel free to do that. I just cannot sanction that as a college professor. But please note, you will need to watch all the films. These are our learning outcomes. I encourage you to take a look at them. They are kind of showing what we're going to do. This is how our class will operate. Basically, we're going to have a lot of asynchronous work, and then we'll meet in person. And the goal of the class is really to use all the work that you do asynchronously so that we can then apply it to the film in our class. And just because we have only 1 hour and 15 minutes, it's really important that you do that work, and so that I don't have to go back over some of this stuff. So there'll be quite a bit of content put online for you to look over. We'll kind of touch briefly about some of that stuff and be applying it in our analysis of the film. So our class will really be focusing on our film, with other historical examples being thrown in to kind of supplement it. This is the breakdown of our required work. You need to attend classes. This is really essential. You will lose 10 points if you miss too many of the in-person classes. You'll have 14 discussion board posts. You'll have 1 essay. It's worth 10 points. Your essay will in fact be something I encourage you to use as a kind of small rough draft for your final research paper. You'll have one essay, and you'll have an introduction to your final research paper and the final research paper. The final research paper, as you can see down here, will be 5 to 6 complete pages. The research paper requires you to at least use 2 outside sources, okay? And it is something that has to be based in some form on our course, but it is something that you'll have quite a bit of latitude. There'll be prompts to help you, and just so you know, there are always prompts for the essay, and there will always be prompts for the discussion board posts. And you've by now, many of you have already taken me before, so you know how discussion board posts work. You have to do a short 250-word mini essay for 3 points, and then you come back and you respond to a post from a classmate. Okay, and that is just a key requirement for the assignment. The essay there'll be an assignment kind of attached to that, but this will give you some general information about it. Late work, I do accept late work on the discussion board posts, essays, and the final paper, but there is a substantial penalty. Just to be fair to the students in the class who submit their work on time, some students may be trying to make the deadline and they don't do their best work. And so if you submit your best work late, to allow for that fairness, there needs to be a penalty. And so now you are being apprised that there's a penalty for late work, but late work is accepted. You can earn extra credit. That is something that is laid out here for you. It's by attending either tutoring sessions at the Writing Center or in some of their visiting some of their classes that they have over the course of the semester, and you have to go to them to see. Just when you go, just make sure that you are doing it for this class. All right, here's a look at our schedule. It is divided into two fields. What to complete asynchronously before class. This is all the work you need to do. So before we actually meet on 131 next Tuesday, you are expected to read these pages from Johnston, to watch Ridley Scott's Alien, and to contribute your post to the Alien discussion board post before 11 p.m. on 1:30. Okay, so the discussion board posts are always due the night before class so that I can look over them before we have class. And then you are expected to come back. This is what we'll be dealing with in class, in the in-class session, and then make sure to come back and provide one other post to respond to at least one other post. I would recommend doing it after we have class in case you want to kind of add some of their conversation to it. It's a really great way of kind of building in the learning of the class into the work we're doing. Okay. This is all laid out here. Just note, we have a couple of holidays, 2/21. There's some homework asynchronously, but there is no in-person session. And that is really just to kind of give you just some basic background on psychoanalysis. The other time is 4/18, when that is spring break. Because our class is on Tuesday and because we have a weird spring break, we actually are only missing one class during spring break. If you have Wednesday classes, you're missing 2. Okay, moving forward, the final paper will be due on 5/22 at 11 p.m. on Turn It In on Blackboard. Just with plagiarism, please look over our statement on plagiarism. One of the things that you should note is that if you're caught plagiarizing, you will fail the class. Please note that plagiarism is anytime you use somebody else's work from various sources without proper attribution. And now, because of new technologies, it's also if you're using ChatGPT. So please do not use ChatGPT for any of the discussion board posts or the essays or final paper, because I have a ChatGPT detector, and so you just don't want to do that. Here is more information on Wellness and Student Resources, American with Disabilities Act. And finally, here is some basic information on where things are on Blackboard for how you can find them for the class. And also our discussion board rubrics. I basically want you to know how I grade the rubrics. I give you points between 1 and 3. you have what is the equivalent of an A- on the post. It'll be a 2.7, just to give you a sense. And these are kind of the reasoning for why you might not do as well. Each of the discussion board posts will lay out what is expected, including if you're supposed to include a quote or some kind of dialogue from the film. I also have a rubric for the responses, so you to be totally transparent. So that is our class in a nutshell, and please look over the syllabus closely and feel free to come to class with any questions on 131 or send me an email and I will answer them. If I see enough of the same questions, I'll go ahead and throw it up on Blackboard so that we all have the answers there. I'm really looking forward to this class. This is one of my favorite classes, and I've been waiting years to teach science fiction film class, and just in the past 2 years I've been doing so. It's been really a challenge to find the list of films. We're moving a little bit more with the historical, merely because I want to go over some things that you can then apply as you continue to watch science fiction films from here on out. Thanks so much. And again, I'm really looking forward to this semester. I hope you are as well, and I'll see you next week.